Good afternoon, everyone. How was your workshops? Did you enjoy it? Ooh. Let's try it again. How were your workshops? Did you enjoy it? Oh, wow, that's great. Wonderful. You have given us the mandate to continue. Just a quick question. How many of you have logged on and used the One BestariNet ID? Fantastic. So let's find a way of making this come alive. How do we take a leap forward, given the challenges we face in Malaysia with education? I think this One Bestari ID is like a key that enables parents, children, and teachers to connect anytime, anywhere. And I hope that all of us will find a way to play with this key, have fun with it, and create unstoppable momentum for this wonderful platform in the next 1 year or so. For this section of this afternoon, I have the great privilege of introducing to you 4 passionate, lifelong learners. And they will come up here in a short while, and we will sit and have kind of like a living room conversation among ourselves. We kind of pretend that you are not around. No, just kidding. We'll have a conversation among ourselves with all of you. And these are 4 people with an incredible track record of public service. The first one is Professor Sugata. We have already heard him talk about technology, hole in the wall, and knowing how to say, I don't know, and I'll come back later. We have Dato Sri Idris, who is joining us this afternoon, and he is the CEO of Pemandu, and he plays blues really well. We have Lord Stewart, who is the member of the House of Lords and the former Vice-Chancellor of London and Edinburgh Universities. You bring with you an incredible amount of wisdom with your track record of experience. And not least, we have Dr. Gana Kumaran, who is the Head of Faculty of Arts and Education at the University of Nottingham, and he is also the President of the Malaysian English Language Teaching Association. And we know that English is so critical for the success of our country, and so Dr. Gana is really passionate about this. Can I invite all of them to come up here, and can you give them a warm welcome? Yeah, there's about 750 people here. Yeah. Well, welcome. Do you like our our living room? Please grab your mics, and you're welcome to have a conversation. And again, we had this in the past 30 minutes before here, we had a lovely dialogue. So I hope that this will just be a continuation of the conversation we had in the holding room. So maybe to kick this off, let me just ask you a very simple question. Tell us in 1 minute, and after 1 minute, the floor will open up and you will fall through the hole. Tell us in 1 minute, what's one memorable lesson you learned from a teacher early on in life, and how has that insight impacted your leadership today? Sugata, you want to go for it? Yeah. What's one memorable lesson you learned from a teacher early on in life, and how has that teacher impacted you up to today?
Well, I'm not sure you've chosen the right person for this, but let me tell you anyway. We used to have a chemistry teacher when I was in school, and during the laboratory sessions, we had to turn on our Bunsen burners. And when the session was over, then he would say, "Burners off." And if you didn't put it off instantly, a stinging slap would appear from almost nowhere onto the side of your face. This affected me quite deeply, and for some reason it produced a great dislike for Bunsen burners.
And that has led you to your sense of greatness where you are, you know?
Well, I don't know. Yes, I suppose I should be really grateful to him.
What about you, Datuk Sri? Any teacher that's impacted you?
Well, I guess to say it's my father. Because my father is my first teacher in primary 1, all the way up to primary 4. My father opened many of the schools in my village. So the one thing that he has said many times over is this idea of always assume the worst, but plan and work for the best. So when you apply that to the classroom, he would say, you're going to sit for these exams, and all the questions are, you haven't studied any of those topics. That's assume the worst. So how do you plan for and aim for the best? You have to study all the topics. You have to study all the topics. You can't spot questions. So you assume that the test will be based on the topics you didn't study. And so, and if you want to be planning for the best, you got to ask the question, who is the best student in the class for each of those topics? And then you got to beat that person. That's what it is.
Oh, you got to put the Bunsen burner to that guy, huh?
Yeah.
All right, okay, all right. Dr. Ghana.
Okay, thank you. I went to, my early years of education was in a sort of rural part of Malaysia. So my worldview was extremely small at that time. And we relied totally on teachers to shape our thinking and also to show us, what's important and what's not important. And one year I had a particular teacher, and this person stands out to me even up to this point. And I think he taught me at that year that, I matter, and that whatever I had within me is important. And crucially, what happened was, at the end of the year, he decided to give his students a little gift for working very hard during the year. And so he brought a set of books and he handed it out to, the students. And I felt very special to actually receive that book. Many years later, I found out that book was actually something free that's given out somewhere else. He got it from some other part of his work elsewhere. But that didn't change my feeling towards what he did, because it simply meant that he had taken the trouble to take that book from wherever he found it and bring it to class and hand it to his students. And I think that's special.
Thank you. And not least, Lord Stewart.
Right. I learned very early on in primary school, when I was about 6, that I could learn. That was tremendous. And I learned that from teachers who wanted me to learn. And I learned the delight and the joy and the happiness, I was a strange child, of manipulating symbols and numbers. It started off multiplication tables, but actually I discovered the great delight in manipulating symbols and putting together pictures of the world I lived in. However, there was another teacher, and she came round. We were having a singing lesson. We were all singing. And she wanted to check out which kids would go into the school choir. And she leant forward and listened to each one of us as we sang as a group. And she sort of tapped me in the shoulder and said, "Stuart, I think you've got a sore throat today. You don't have to sing anymore." Now, one of the things that taught me is you might be good at some things, you might be not so good at others, and you find the ones that you really enjoy.
Wow. So a rich experience, even just in this quick 1 minute, from events that can sometimes traumatize us, but shape us into greatness, as well as parents, as well as other teachers who see promise in you and give you free things, and that still motivates you. Wonderful. Another quick question, another quick 1 minute question, otherwise the trapdoor will fall out through. Share with us what is perhaps one defining moment that led you to have this passion for education, if there was a defining moment. Where did your passion for education come from? What makes you tick? Anyone who's ready can give this question a shot. Let's go the other way. Oh, let's go. Okay, all right.
Well, okay, it'll fall in my lap. Actually, it maybe wasn't just one moment, but I won't take more than a minute. But having learned I could enjoy manipulating symbols, later on in school, I learned I could actually read books that taught me something. I could read complicated books. I could read Russian novels, and they're, by God, they're complicated, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy. But it enriched my life. And that, again, persuaded me, find the things that you enjoy and that you benefit from and that develop you as a person. Then I had a teacher who taught me a little bit about philosophy. And I learned manipulating numbers can become manipulating ideas. And manipulating ideas, I spent nearly 30 years of my life studying and teaching philosophy as a result. And that was all. I came from the poor end of my city when I was a boy in 1946. And learning from these teachers that you had a potential through things that you really enjoy was a great, great lesson.
Wow.
I think I became a teacher out of destiny. If you can go back and look at the 001 card that you fill in your school each year, your teacher asks you, what's your ambition? And you'd never find in any one of my years that I'd said teacher. But then when I finished my Form 6 education and was waiting for my results to be announced, I decided to take a temporary teacher's job, just to pass time. And I got this job in the worst school in my town, notorious school. The police would come and go as they like. It's like the second home. But then engaging with that students, and I was asked to teach one of the poorest, weakest classes in the school, engaging with the students at that point, and managing to win some of their hearts in terms of wanting to listen to me and wanting to follow some of the things that I suggested to them. I think that's the point, if I would say, defined my decision to become a teacher.
Wow. Thank you.
Some of you know that I was born in the jungle. I was brought up in a very, very remote place in Barrio. My village is still there, by the way, near the Kalimantan border. When I was a kid, the nearest town from Barrio is actually a town called Marudi. It used to take us about 1 week to go by boat and another week to walk through the jungle to get to the nearest town. Now, the defining moment for me about education passion was this. When I was studying, everybody said, read books. And, I started to read novels. And I realized that what I was reading inside those books, I realized it was a world beyond the mountains. There was a huge world beyond the mountains. The only thing we knew as kids was everything in that village, within that mountain. And we realized that the more books I read, the more I realized it was a world beyond the mountain. And so the teachers were the most important people in my village. My father was the head teacher, and they were the ones who taught everyone about knowledge and education. Then they told us one thing, that education is the answer to poverty. And more importantly, passing the exam is the passport to go to town. So if you pass the exam, you will go to town, because that's where you'll be going. So I couldn't imagine failing the exams. And failing the exam would be like signing myself on a death warrant. So it really was. So the books was the most important thing. And I read every book that I thought was important. I volunteered to be a librarian. I read King Solomon's Mine, all the books by Jack London, The Call of the Wild. I read every single one of those best books that were there because I realized there was a huge world beyond. And so the other day I went to a conference invited by the Dayak Association. They asked me the question, many years, 40 or 50 years of Dayak history, and an assessment, what about the next 50 years? And they wanted me to speak for an hour. I said, look, for that topic, I only need 5 minutes. Because the answer to that, for the Dayak to progress, is only one word, education. If you tell me what I'm going to do for the Dayak community in the next 1 year, I would spend an hour because I will say what we need to do for roads, what we need to do. But if you tell me what is the one thing that we need to do to make a big progress for 50-year period, there's only one thing, education. And so I feel very passionate about the important role that education has for the development of our nation. 50 years down the road, if we don't take a very radical approach to enhancing the quality of education, I think we'll slip behind quite a lot of the neighboring countries. So this is the most important thing that we got to do as a passion for our country.
Wow, sounds like among the three of you, adversity and books are a common theme, and somehow you're able to thrive through all that. Professor Sugata,
Well, as I mentioned earlier, that my education has never been in my background, because I never studied education as a subject. And I studied physics, which led me into computer science. And what actually happened was some developments in the 1980s when this subject called artificial intelligence was first born, and all of us were very excited, oh, the computers are going to think like people. And so we started to build these systems, and we said, well, we must be having a database of names and addresses in our heads. So we built a database of names and addresses in the computer's head. And then we said, oh, if somebody says, how are you, we can reply in several different ways. We can say, I'm fine, how are you, and so on and so forth. So we built a database of those. And we went on building databases for about 10 years. All around the world, people were building databases. And then finally, we came to the conclusion that that can't be what's there inside our heads. It can't be possible that we have so many databases, because the computers are not sounding like human beings with all these databases in them. So there has to be something completely different that's happening inside, and which is the basis of how we learn, and why we remember a telephone number from 20 years ago, and why we don't remember a birthday of somebody we were told about 7 days ago. All this is a great mystery. And I thought that we have to solve that mystery, because unless we understand how learning happens, we won't understand what it's for. So I decided to get into it. It's a very hard subject, keeps you, sort of gives you sleepless nights, but it's kind of fun.
and you are very fascinated with what you don't know.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I think, if you make a list of all the things you know, they will look like a rather boring list. But if you make a list of all the things we don't know, and I do this very often for children, and they'll all sit up and say, really? We don't know those things? Okay, so I think all of us like the things we don't know.
Great. Well, in this next phase of our conversation, we have spent the day together. Dato Sri, you were not here for part of for this day, but in the morning we had a series of talks, and then in the afternoon we had some workshops, all centered around the One Bestari Net platform and how our country, how YTL and Frog Asia is wiring up our country and creating this platform for parents and children and teachers to work together both in classroom and outside classroom. In your own words, can you share with us why is this so significant? And please speak to one another and feel free to disagree with one another too. Sugata, can I get you to kick us off?
Well, I can try, but over there it says educate Sugata. So
It's impossible. We need to get out and leave you for 2 months, and then something will happen.
See, first of all, I think you'll agree that everybody likes the internet, without exception, and everybody dislikes having to pay for it. Okay? So any government which says, okay, your teachers, your learners, here it is. Use it properly and you don't have to pay for it. Okay? I like that. But having said that, there is the next part, which is that there was a proviso, use it properly. I think if we can define that clearly for the teachers, for the parents, and for the children, then we'll make it. Otherwise, it will be a net that people don't understand, and that is never very helpful.
Can I just react to that? One of the defining points in my life, that wasn't early, it was much later. Because looking down here, I too was an electronic dinosaur. And I came in touch through YTL with Frog. And they began to develop a vision, and I was delighted to be part of it. And that vision was about a technological change that's taking place right now that will change the lives of everyone. All the kids know it. I look at my grandchildren, they know things I don't know, and I'm easy to tell them what I don't know because they know it. This technological change is available here in Malaysia, and I'll maybe come back to this in a moment, but it's a distinctive and unique thing that you can drive forward as a community, and I'll be watching. But the inspiration, meeting Frog, seeing what they could do, seeing what YTL wanted to make of this in their country as a part of their own patriotism, I found that very inspiring.
Just adding on to the point, to me, there are two things that the One Bistari Net would do that we don't normally do other than that. The first one is that we all know we have some really good teachers that we think about in all of our education system. I know some of them. But the point is that you cannot replicate those teachers physically all across the country. So with this platform, you can replicate those teachers virtually. And that's the key. Because you can't have, for example, Margaret Lim, who's passed away now, is one of my best English teachers that I knew. That Margaret Lim could not have been replicated everywhere. But if her modules, in terms of content, was shared across the country, then effectively Margaret Lim would be actually made virtually available to all the schools. So that's one of the big things that I think this is the biggest revolution it does. The second point is this. We have kids that have different speed of learning. Some are slow, some are fast. But of course, in the classroom, the teacher that teach, they will follow one method. That's the schedule that they have to run it through. With ICT, the technology that's available, the kids can learn at their own pace. They can learn at home, they can learn slowly, and the teacher is not tired. And so I think those are the two key things that I believe this will do for us. Now, when we started to talk these things over, this isn't the first time that Malaysia has attempted to do this before. Before, it didn't work. So when we started to talk about how do we do this, we concluded that there were 4 elements that we need to cobble together to make it work. The first one is about connectivity. You cannot work this thing through if you simply had isolated computers and notebook that people have in their classroom and that didn't connect with the teachers and the parents and the students. The connectivity is absolutely key. Wiring the school is important. The second thing that was absolutely needed for us when we started to think about how important this was, the content. How do we get the teachers on fire to put their best teaching methods and share them onto the platform so that they can then you become virtually available to all the schools. That's the issue about content. The third one is about making sure that we get the best platform that's available to make this work. Without the right platform that we have available, we cannot do this. And the fourth one, it relates very importantly, making sure that we got the right device. And that is why we came with the Chromebook to make sure we got the right device. Now, why is this different was this time round is we recognize that you cannot have just one of those 4. You can't have 2 of those 4. You need all 4 of them to come together. The content must be put out there. To be honest with you, I would consider this is a big failure if our teachers do not put their content, the best content that's available, onto the platform. And if there is no connectivity, it wouldn't work too. If we don't have the right device, it wouldn't work. So I think this is key. And I am actually totally convinced today with the partners we have, Google coming in to do this. Malaysia is at a crossroad. We can redefine the destiny of this country if we take this wholeheartedly to push it. I'm actually inspired by what they do in Stanford University. They have cases in Stanford where they began to really push the utilization of this to make a tremendous progress in the lecturing that they have there to spread, if you like, knowledge. So this idea of a leap of knowledge is critical. And here we are for Malaysia, as we put the education blueprint together, one of the shifts that is there is that we must put this, the wired community on education, as the way in which Malaysia has to leapfrog into the competitiveness of nations.
It's not just Malaysia that's at the crossroads, it's the whole human race. And this hasn't happened in education for 500 years. Last time it happened, they invented printing. And all the sore people out there, they said, oh, it'll never work. Oh, it's not, it's not for me. I learned another way. I use a quill pen. What'll I do with all my quill pens if what you say is right? Well, the thing to do with quill pens is to put them in the museum and take up the benefits of print. Now there we are, 500 years later, something of similar magnitude. And Malaysia's in the vanguard because it has seized this opportunity. And it really can do things that will show the world, not just the local region, the world, what can happen if you take this technology and apply it to the total population. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I think if you ask me, there are two things. One is anyone who's working with education will be concerned about equity and inclusion. And this offers us an opportunity to do that, to provide equity across the board. All teachers, all learners have the opportunity to have access to the same type of learning opportunities. So that's fundamental, I think. Secondly, I think we are also in a very fortunate position to lead something. In fact, if you look around Malaysia, most universities are struggling to get onto this kind of platform, technology. This would be the first time the schools would lead the universities, right? And that's fantastic. I think the opportunity, I'm not saying that this is an answer to all our problems. I'm sure that we are going to encounter challenges as we try and build on this platform that we have now. But we will work. I think we need to be convinced that we can work on it and improve it, right? And we need to ensure that the proper support is set up so that teachers are not frustrated, schools are not frustrated, parents are not frustrated, and children are not frustrated. Getting it right from the start is very important to me. And I think that's where we are all standing now, the start. And if we are convinced and we agree, we'll get it right.
Dr. Sugata, given your experience of watching different countries doing this, you can hear we are excited, we are energized, we are convinced that it will work. Can you pour some cold water on us? Give us some warnings, some reality checks perhaps, some things to watch out for.
Well, I was actually trying to imagine myself in the shoes of a school teacher listening to this. And here are some of the things that might go through my mind. So, it's one more thing. I've got 66 to do, and now there's 67.
Sounds like something's resonating with the people out there.
So, and I wouldn't blame the teaching community for thinking that, because if you look at the number of administrative things that they have to do, lists and totals and files, and believe me, this spontaneous applause, I've heard it from all 5 continents. So it is for the ministries of education to listen and to figure out what are they trying to say. Can the system reduce that administrative content? Okay. How will we learn how to do that. Do I now need to go for another training course at the cost of my time and then come back to school and have the headmaster say that, why weren't you teaching, why were you going for this training course? So do I have to do that, or is it intuitive enough? Will the machine ask me, what are the various administrative things you have to do? And will the machine tell me, I can do 7 out of the 10 things that you need to do? Then I'm willing to give it a shot. One more thing that I would do if I was a school teacher, and I wish I was in this environment that you're creating, is that I would create a few lessons, but I would not create all the lessons. What I would do is I would go to, let's say, class 7 or year 7, and I would say, you know, there's this new thing, this new platform. Can you make me a lesson on gravity? And they would say, so what's gravity? And you would say, well, you figure that out, you know, I don't have time. Okay? They will make you that lesson, okay? They'll figure it out a lot faster than you will. And then you say, okay, now let's see, do other schools pick up that lesson on gravity? And if you're lucky, if the lesson made by your children get used in 17 others, you've made it, you know? You would have used the package in exactly how, showing the power that it has. So I would say 2 important things. Can you reduce our administrative load using the network? Can you give us the liberty to play with it instead of telling us, you know, how many lessons have you made last week? Okay? If you allow us to do that, we'll show you new ways to use the system to its best advantage.
Fantastic.
Can I add to that? I think, Professor, you're right in a sense that many of the teachers clap hand because it resonates with them, that idea. And I do believe that there is only one thing that is important when you are a teacher. There's only one thing. We are there to improve student outcome. It may be many, many KPIs that exist out there, but there's only one outcome that is really, truly important. We are there simply because the student outcomes has to improve. So whether you like it or not, that's it. Everything else is pale in comparison. There are means to make sure the student outcome is enhanced. So I would say today that the teachers really need to ask the question, how do you improve, let's be brutal about it, how do you improve the grades of the students? And that's to be debated. Some people say passing the exam is not as important as learning other things. But I'm very old school. I believe that the students must do better in their exams. And so it's very important, and I think that's the measurement. So if your school is in grade 6 today, we grade all the schools, A, B, C, D, E, F. If you're 6 and 7, then your school is really bad. How do you improve the standards and the proficiency of the kids? When we started this whole point before, we ran the lab, and people say, you guys are crazy in Pemandu and the ministry. How can you possibly rank all the schools, 9,814 schools in Malaysia, from number 1 to number 9,814? Of course we can. We take all the grades of the student subject by subject over the last 5 years, and you say, well, the best grades are the one number 1. The worst ones, number 9,014. And we originally wanted to publish the rank order of all the schools and put it in the newspaper until headmasters freaked out. How come you can't go and publish in the newspaper that my school is number 9,814? Then if you did so, everybody will leave. Now, to me, that's the crux of it. If the kids are all failing geography in primary 4 over the last 4 years, you're going to ask the question, should the teacher perhaps should sit for the geography test? And so when we looked at even English, the proficiency of English, there are 70,000 teachers that teach English. And we got all of them to sit for the Cambridge placement test. And of course, the public knowledge, it's already known today. We've already announced publicly that only 70% are on the 70%, only 30% are satisfactory. 70% not quite making it. And so that's why we're working in the government with to make sure those that didn't quite make it, they have to go through this. Now, when we started to think it through, it would be very difficult. It would take us a long time to get to the point when they will all be proficient, the 70,000. Then it dawned on us, the point that you raised. The guys at Microsoft, when we talked, sorry, it's not Google at that time, when we talked to Microsoft and they were talking to Stanford, they were saying, look, you have to teach the teachers how to become good facilitators. If they become good facilitators, provided your content is on the right platform, they can then, the teachers will use the facilitation skills to utilize the content that was created to then get the students to learn better. They don't have to be achieving the top proficiency in geography. And so I know you're trying to make me stop now. So I will take on
Our
the
time
cue.
is up.
Yeah, so I think the key here is what really strikes me in that was this. Over time, we will have to figure out a different way to retrain our teachers so that they're a lot better at becoming much more facilitators. Yes, of course, we want to be 100% very, very good and very proficient in the subject. But I think the new schooling system, the new learning methods will be very different from the one that you and I, we all people, we learn from. And I think that's what we have to grapple with.
Well, thank you. Our time is up, but Dr. Ghana and Lord Stewart, can you just wrap it up with just a few sentences of perhaps how teachers can use this platform to create an unstoppable force in the next 1 or 2 years? Very simple question,
Yeah,
Dr. Ghana.
I think just one point. The point is that change is, of course, challenging, right? But before you pass a verdict on it, you've got to try and understand it. You've got to see whether whatever is being proposed is something that's going to add value to the education context of the country.
I say to teachers, when you feel down and when the cold water comes, and it will, and it'll be difficult to change your perception at times, just remember what took you into education. And just look into the eyes of the kid who's sitting there in the way that we saw on Sugata's videos, the kid who is alight with the desire to learn. That's what that generation is ahead of us. And we have to catch up with them if we're going to practice education in the way that we should in the future. And I just stress again, Malaysia, I'm envious. You really have an opportunity here that I wish my country had had. We did it piecemeal. We're fine. We're doing good things. But you have an opportunity to do something unique, something distinctive that will set the pace for the rest of the world. Seize it, and teachers go with them.
Wow. Sugata, thank you for joining us and providing us a perspective, teaching us to unlearn what we already know and teaching us how to say, I don't know. Idris, thank you for your persistence in pulling together an ecosystem that will help teachers and parents and educators thrive. Dr. Ghana, thank you for your years, decades of service on the ground and at a policy level in making things better. And Lord Stewart, you give us this challenge that every day we are called to look at a child in the eye and light that spark and love of learning. Can all of us thank our panel for their insights? Thank you. Thank you.